Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Talking Books. I'm here today with A.J. Jacobs, who's a singular author but of multiple descriptions. So the book jacket to today's talking book calls you a journalist, lecturer, and human guinea pig. Do you accept that? Maybe you wrote that description.
I approved that message. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
did. I think it might have been my words. So yeah, I think I like to dive into a lifestyle and live it, sort of like George Plimpton, but he would join sports teams. I don't like the physical. I don't like getting punched in the face by a heavyweight boxer. So mine are more social and emotional and intellectual feats as opposed to physical.
Although you really kind of took him one better because Paper Lion or whatever, that's like a couple month project, but you dive into a whole identity and hold it for what, a year or more?
Yeah, at least a year. And I don't know if that's better or worse or dumber, but
Yeah.
yes, I definitely go all in. And yeah, they take a long time to write, so I'm not sure financially that was my best decision, but I love it. I do love my job.
Cool. Well, all right. So let's talk about this one's a little different. I mean, when I think about your incarnating different identities, something like the year of living biblically, where you'd resolve to obey every biblical injunction, or drop dead healthy come immediately to mind. This book, The Puzzler, is an exploration of puzzles throughout history and their enduring and for some obsessive hold on the human imagination. Let me just ask, I mean, your topics, AJ, are fascinating. How do you choose them as you look back over a growing set of your brain children there? You see any features that unite them? Do you sometimes choose and then reject? How do you, when you're between books, how do you figure out what's next?
Yeah, it has to be something that A, I'm passionate about, and B, that I think will have a bigger message. So I have been told to, what if you tried to become the best French horn player in the world? Might be an interesting book for someone else. I'm not passionate about it. One that gets suggested with disturbing regularity is that I try to be the best lover in the world and do all the positions in the Kama Sutra, which
Uh-huh.
my wife put the immediate kibosh on, which I think for everybody's sake, that's a good thing.
But you
Uh,
actually broached. All right, so you gave 2 seconds of consideration to
I
it.
thought I'd at least bring it up.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, they don't always work out. I mean, I think I am pretty good at coming up with ideas quantity wise, but I think that, like a lot of people, not all my ideas are good. So the key is to try to find the good ones. And this book actually came about in a weird way because I was in the middle of writing another book that actually might interest you, the topic. It was all about the epistemic crisis, all about the post-truth world that we live in. And it was called
Yeah.
Fact Checking My Life. And I wanted to fact check everything that I took for granted. Like, how do I know the world is round? How do I know that Julie, my wife, loves me? She says
Yeah.
she loves me, but I'm not in her mind. How do I know Newsmax is not more reliable than the New York Times in representing reality? And
Or
it
that
is
or that FDR was president or everything.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a good one. I hadn't thought of
Well, no,
that.
I mean, all kinds of historical facts. Yeah, but
Right.
right.
History is
Yeah.
fascinating. How do we
Yeah.
know that history happened? And uh, so I was starting it. I still think it's a fascinating topic. I was frankly overwhelmed and stressed out, so stressed out that I was going to contribute to the problem instead of help solve it and just be another voice in the chaos. So my agent saw that I was so unhappy and said, "Why don't you do something that you love?" And he knew I've loved puzzles all my life. So he says, "Why don't you try that?" And thank God for him because it was a much more pleasant 3 years.
That's a great story. But you actually went a couple steps down the road of the Epistemic Project?
Oh, yeah. And I
Uh,
interviewed some fascinating people, and I'm still
uh,
obsessed with it. I'm just not sure I have a handle on how to write it or how to solve it. It is,
Yeah.
if you do, I would love to
I
know.
mean, no, look, it's just, I think of it as super duper tough. I read, it brings to mind a paper by this brilliant, but inscrutable guy named Saul Kripke, just on the minor subset of that. How do we know what a name is and what it refers to? And man, oh man, I think you would have dedicated yourselves to some very dark corners and very long alleys. So I'm glad we're on the puzzlers. Some
Thank you.
actual
Right.
some
And the
problems you can get your
Bertrand
hands
Russell,
around. Yes,
right?
right,
That was
exactly, right.
Bertrand Russell talking about how do we know 1 + 1 = 2?
Right.
So that kind of thing. Yeah, I could.
Yeah. Okay. And that's all we have time for today on Talking Books. Okay. Um, so as with you, fortunately for us, you chose the puzzler. Here it is, guys. Oh, it's this way. Come back a little.
That's it.
You take the reader on a very granular tour of a special world, or demi-monde, maybe, since we just said epistemic. Here, puzzlers. So let's start here. Who are puzzlers and what makes them different from non-puzzlers?
Well, puzzler to me, and the word puzzles is it's a big tent, because
Yeah.
there are so many different kinds, and I actually have this argument sometimes. People say, "Oh, I don't like puzzles," and I'm not sure that's true because I think it's like dating. I guess there are asexual people, but there's a type out there for everyone because there's crosswords, there's logic puzzles, mysteries. I consider like a thriller. I
Yeah.
consider that a puzzle, and a mechanical puzzle, Japanese puzzle boxes. Like it just goes on and on, and and I take it to mean even more because I take it as sort of a bigger metaphor that life is filled with puzzles. So if you are interested in life, which hopefully
Yeah.
you are, you're also interested in puzzles. So to me, there's no one type of puzzler. I will say, generally, though, if I had to stereotype, it's people who are really interested in creative thinking, also detail oriented. You do have to be detail oriented to solve some, and 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 they also have to be playful. You have to have some sort of, uh, you have to, and for better or worse, a lot of puzzlers love puns. I was never a big pun fan, but I've kind of been converted against my will to being a punster.
If they're really good. So fair enough. And I do think, I mean, from my own standpoint, I always thought I liked puzzles, but I married a mathematician, and she gave birth to children of mathematical bent. And man, we can go to like an escape room or something like that, and something lights in her that just zeroes in, and I realize I'm maybe about a 60 on the puzzling scale, and I feel myself withdrawing. But your point about detail, I think, is really well taken. It's, she loves this idea that it's given to you, and you, for a well constructed puzzle, you think you're going to use most every snippet, and your mind is always kind of keeping them aboard as you're doing different things. So it's a kind of creativity, but it's one where the toolkit is sort of given to you. Um, well, just a few more minutes on the really exemplary quintessential puzzlers. In your book, you talk about going to the National Puzzlers Convention. So, like,
Right.
you go to conventions, and you go to Trekkie conventions or Comic Con, and they really let their puzzler flag fly high. So, what's that like? Tell me, just sort of walking through as a little bit of that fellow traveler that year. I think it's fair to say. Tell me
Oh
what
yeah.
what it looked like, that visit to that partially alien territory.
Well, first of all, it was hilarious because the National Puzzlers Convention has been around. It's the oldest puzzle league in the world. And every year they choose a different beautiful city. They spend hours debating where should we have it. And I went to the one in Boulder. But the weird thing is they never leave the hotel lobby. They're just
Of
sitting
course.
there with their
Let's
pencils, and it's
yeah,
like,
right.
you could
Wanna
go,
leave,
why are you
right.
choosing these beautiful cities?
Yeah.
It's a complete waste. And they are, yeah, and they just spend, late nights just puzzling away. And this was at a different puzzle convention, the American Crossword Puzzle Tournament, but it is a peculiar crowd in that they will, they don't let mistakes go by easily. So they will bust you, which made me very nervous about writing this book. But I
Right.
remember they had a palindrome contest. Will Shortz, the New York Times editor, had a palindrome
Who
contest
a
at the most
sidebar
recent.
contributor to Talking Feds and a great guy generally. Keep going, sorry.
Oh,
Had to give
I
that
haven't heard
little
him yet.
plug. Yep. Uh-huh.
And he had a $200 prize for the palindrome contest. And as you might imagine, that did not go over well. It's got to be $202. Why are they doing a 200? So
Perfect.
that's the kind of thing you have to
They
deal
are.
with. And I will say, I was very nervous because originally they designed the cover of the Puzzler, and on it, as you might have seen, is a crossword puzzle. But it was designed by just an artist. And
Yes.
I thought it was beautiful. I put it up on Facebook, and wow, I got
Yeah.
dozens of emails from crossword people saying, that's not a real crossword.
This is
It's not
Motley. Right. Right. You actually
well,
have
this
jigs-
one is
right.
the replacement. I had to go
Oh, I
back
see.
in and beg my publisher. This one works. It is symmetrical. It doesn't have
Oh,
two-letter
I
words.
see.
But there's an actual Twitter feed called Not a Puzzle that makes fun of artists who draw fake crossword puzzles that are not up to standards. So it's a tough crowd. It's a tough crowd,
Yeah.
but luckily they've accepted me.
And it is a tough crowd, but it's a crowd that has real delight in certain features of puzzles in particular. Are you able to sort of, from your time with them, abstract a sense of the most the puzzles that really light a fire or float their boats the highest? What qualities do they sort of have in common?
Well, one of my favorite adventures, I went to the MIT Mystery Hunt, which is sort of like an escape room on bath salts. It is every year, 2,000 of incredibly brilliant people come to Boston, to the MIT campus. It's been going on for decades. And they spend 72 straight hours solving the craziest, hardest puzzles you can imagine. And these things, they don't come with instructions. And they are, to the uninitiated, just you'll get like a puzzle will be a fortune cookie, and you'll open it up, and inside are a bunch of strange symbols. That's the whole puzzle. You don't even know what to do or where to start. But I think what sets the favorite ones of those apart is this idea of a leap where you are able to connect two completely different things. So a good puzzle will connect something like the constellations and Justin Bieber's tour dates. You just have these two completely different fields, and somehow you're able to mash them up. And that gives them such delight. And me too, when I'm able to solve them, which is not as often.
Julie was doing the crossword yesterday, and she said, place for Napoleon was the clue, and we were all over, the Elba, Helena, etc., and it turned out to be bakery. So there you go.
There you go.
But you talk about other things in the book. What interests me when you sort of anatomize it is on the one hand, you talk about people showing how smart they are, kind of peacock theory, but also
Right.
what a social activity it can be, and even sort of quasi spiritual. Is that fair? You think it sort of connects to some kind of infinite, back to your epistemic project, but
Yeah, some people
yeah,
have that. I don't have that as much. I don't get it doesn't transport me
right,
to, but some people do talk about it as a spiritual experience that,
yeah,
and certainly you get in the flow and the minutes pass by, like
right,
the hours pass by like minutes. But yeah, and the communal thing, the cooperation, I think, is a great point that I became really interested in, because it is the stereotype is that you're alone and solving
Yeah.
the crossword alone, and it's a solitary activity, but actually quite the opposite. The puzzlers I met saw it as a communal activity, and it really brought these communities together. And actually, Josh Wordle, saw
Yep.
him speak. He's the inventor of Wordle, and he spoke at the crossword puzzle tournament, and he told a lovely story that like could have been scripted by Hollywood, but it was all about a gay man who had been ostracized by his conservative family, and the only thing that brought them together was Wordle. Like they played Wordle together, and that was the basis of them repairing their relationship, which is lovely, and I think true. I think I see it all the time, people working together.
Back to my wife. So they're mathematicians. They, paddle around in their socks and do whatever they're doing their day. But then they convene at 3 o'clock to do the crossword puzzle with down clues only. And that's a
Mm.
very kind of communal. And I think that's a part of the sort of deep pleasure of it if you're with like-minded people. All right. There is a degree of obsession, I think, with puzzles that comes through many of the characters in the book, even yourself in certain, like the late night spelling bee. And I was thinking about the Sleeping Beauty puzzle on page 214, readers. But what is it about puzzles, maybe with that in mind, that can be so, all consuming and put you in a kind of flow? Do you have thoughts about
Right.
that?
Well, a flow in a good way and a bad way.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
can be, it can, as far as addictions go, I think it's a relatively good one, but
Hmm.
any addiction is bad. And yes, this
Says
Sleeping
the
Beauty
man who goes
problem,
from addiction to addiction. But
it's
okay.
true.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
addicted to
Yeah.
addictive
Right.
activities. But the Sleeping Beauty problem is a fascinating one, and it's too
Tell us
complicated to get
about it.
into it now.
Oh, really? Okay. I
Well,
thought
no, no,
because
I
we'll
could
talk
tell you
about
the
some.
broad
Yeah.
strokes. The
Yeah.
broad strokes are, it's basically, people might have heard of the Monty Hall problem,
Yeah.
which is a much more accessible version of this. It has to do with probability, and it's completely counterintuitive. It's a story about Sleeping Beauty. She goes to sleep. The scientist wakes her up, gives her an amnesia-inducing pill, flips a coin. There are all these variables.
Right.
But the question is, if you ask Sleeping Beauty what day it is, what is she going to say? And there is no consensus even today among mathematicians and philosophers. So it's different. The Monty Hall problem does have an answer. This one has spawned 100 philosophy papers, and they're crazy. Some are dealing with multiple universes. It's just an amazing, and I included it just because it's such a crazy problem. And one of the people I interviewed, I was fearful for his mental health. He spent 2 years doing nothing but thinking about this problem, and
Yeah.
his wife was concerned. And the worst part was, from a moral standpoint, I called him up and he said, well, I just was able to put it all in a folder and put it in the closet, but I'm glad you called, because now I'm going to get it out. And I was like, oh
Oh
no,
no.
am I like, pouring a drink for an alcoholic? But he
Right.
said, in the end, he was happy that I sort of was able to validate. He was able to tell someone about what he thought about. I think that we are wired to find solutions, and puzzles are sort of the platonic ideal, because it's like this perfect solution, which in life you don't usually get. So you do get that aha moment, and I'm told that it's dopamine, which is the reward neurochemical,
Yeah.
and which is the addictive one. So I can see how it can become addictive. One thing that I loved when studying the history of puzzles is, over and over again you see this this concern that this is a menace, this is a pestilence on society. Like when the New York Times refused to print crossword puzzles for the first 25 years they were
Right.
invented, and instead wrote articles about how it was causing divorces and murders and prison riots. These are literal all articles about it, and that athletes are not training because they're too busy with the crosswords. And then, of course, they made a 180, and then now the
Right.
paragon of puzzles.
Took over Wordle. Okay, so there's also a sense that comes through among the most ardent puzzlers that puzzles can be beautiful and ugly. Even, and and of course, an interesting feature is they do have solutions. I guess that would be the ultimate ugly puzzle. um, I'm thinking of the Roz Chast cartoon. This here's this has nothing to do with anything, but this week answers to last week's puzzle, a toughie, and you realize none of them are going down are words at all. They're just complete gibberish. But what for the most aesthetically minded puzzlers makes a puzzle beautiful? Would you say?
Well, that's it. I'd actually love to talk to your wife about that because I
Yeah,
know that mathematicians sometimes talk about the beauty
beautiful
of a
solutions,
solution.
definitely. Yeah,
Right. I would say, well, you had brought up an email an interesting point, which
yeah,
is that puzzles have to be in that sweet spot. Uh, they can't be too easy or obvious a solution, but they have to be fair. They can't be arbitrary. And so when you solve it, you have to say, "Oh, I should have seen that earlier." That's the
yeah.
reaction you want. So
Or
that
it's almost a
plays a
moment of
lot of
communion with the puzzle author, yeah?
right.
You're
I love
oh,
that you
we
say
mind
that.
meld, yeah.
Right. And I remember when I solved this puzzle that was 150 years old that I thought I was the first to solve it in 150 years. Turns out Will Shortz had also solved it. But it was a pretty profound feeling to be able to commune with this guy from 150 years ago. So I think that's part of it. I think there's visual. It was interesting interviewing the Sudoku creators because they consider themselves artists. They say you can computers can generate Sudokus. They can generate a million in a second, but the the artisans claim that their Sudokus tell a story, are beautiful, and
Right.
they leave a trail. They talk about leaving a breadcrumb trail that tells a story as opposed to just randomly filling in numbers. So it is fascinating to see that they, and I do think it is an art form. I mean, I tried. I made decent puzzles, but nowhere near the masterpieces that these people have.
Well, I mean, you're surveying culture I mean, puzzles, as it turns out, go back as far as can be, and they've always been there. I think there's something about a beautiful solution that has to do with really difficult or complicated issue giving way to simplicity.
Mm,
I think people still rail about, say, superstring theory or whatever, that we're not at the end there because it's so clunky and there's no elegance to the solution. I'm riffing still more on mathematics, but the like Fermat's last theorem, which people tried forever to solve, and you have a book of its solution by a Princeton mathematician that is every bit as I'm not sure if it's very different than the guy who worked on the Sleeping Beauty problem, except you can't get tenure with the Sleeping Beauty problem. Maybe you can actually now, but the
maybe.
idea is it was a puzzle in the sense that Fermat writes on. I mean, what makes it so fascinating, I think, even to a lay audience, is Fermat writes in the margins. I've got a really cool little solution here, and you got it. That must be something sweet and simple. I think most people think maybe he had it wrong, but nevertheless, the idea that this incredibly complicated thing, like relativity giving way to E equals mc squared or something
Mm,
you it's like you cross out the things in the numerator and denominator and there it is 25
mm.
or and that's the kind of beauty. Not sure, but I'm thinking again of the mathematical world. um Switching directions a little bit, AJ, a theme that comes up again in the book is the impact of technology on puzzles. I was a chess player as a kid, and my on my very best day, I would now be bested by a watch computer, and it sort of seems to change what human achievement in those fields consists of. Do you worry that technology sort of takes away from the art of the puzzle?
Well, it's an interesting question. Again, pleading epistemic humility. I'm not sure I
Yeah.
have the final answer.
But
For
you wrote the
the
book. Who else would have it?
It's true. If anyone does, I do. I interviewed Gary Kasparov. He came over to
Uh-huh.
play chess
Right.
puzzles with me, and it was a great encounter. He was, his reputation is that he's a little cranky, and that he definitely lived up to that. He complained about my chess set being too cheap, that I didn't
Yeah.
have a nicer
What's
chess
the
set,
straight
but
Staunton? Yeah.
he's great anyway,
Yeah.
and he. I asked him about this computer versus human, and he said, which I thought was very clever, that he was the first knowledge worker to have his job threatened by a computer because he was beaten by Big Blue, and I think that's true. But he remains optimistic that they will not replace humans. He is very much in the that we'll work together and cooperate and create even better things. So that could be true for the puzzle realm. I mean, it is interesting right now. Puzzles, computers could solve Sudoku in like a tenth of a second.
Yeah.
I don't think the AIs, I could be wrong, but the AIs have not reached the level yet where they can appreciate the wordplay of a really tricky crossword. So, in a sense, that is kind of why I prefer crosswords to Sudoku. I feel that at least there is some advantage I have as a human to be able to look at things in a quirky way. And that may go away soon, but I'm clinging to it while we have it.
Yeah. So let me stay with you personally. Do you have, there's, depending on how you count, a dozen or 3 dozen basic kinds of puzzles that and different cultures are specialize in different kinds. Do you personally have a sort of favorite type or even a favorite puzzle among the hundreds of examples in the book?
Well, I am a word nerd at
Yeah.
heart, and and actually the opening story in the book, I don't know if you remember, it was
Yeah.
about 7 years ago. I was the answer to a clue in the New York
Yeah.
Times crossword puzzle, and I
What a
thought it was the
trivia.
greatest day.
Yeah.
I was on cloud nine
Did you
as a
know it in
lifelong.
advance?
No, I
Oh
didn't.
my.
And someone,
Oh.
but the twist was that I got an email from my brother-in-law who did congratulate me. I want to put that out there. But he also pointed out it was Saturday's New York Times crossword puzzle, where all the answers are, it's the hardest of the week. The
Right,
answers are
exactly.
totally obscure. So
Yeah.
his point was, this
You're
is not a compliment. This is proof in black and white that no one knows who you are. You're obscure. And so I was crushed. And
Yeah,
I actually
yeah.
told that
Sour
story on
grapes.
a podcast. Yeah, I know. I wasn't really crushed. But I told the story on a podcast, and I was saved. It happened a New York Times crossword creator was listening, and he actually put me in a Tuesday puzzle where I don't belong. I do not belong in a Tuesday, because that's where like the really famous people like Lady Gaga or Joe Biden, that's
I
where
see.
they go.
So I mean,
But
you're quite well known in your own right. You think of yourself though as sort of a Wednesday, Thursday guy. Is that
No,
about?
no, I'm fully a Saturday, and I'm
Oh, I
okay with
see.
that. Uh, so crosswords have always been, but as I've gotten more into them, uh, crosswords, as you probably know, there are two types of clues. There's the
Yeah.
trivia clues and then the wordplay clues. So the trivia clues are, what's the main river in Uganda, and then the wordplay clues are, well, Will Short's his favorite that he always quotes. He says,
Yeah.
something along the lines of this turns into another story, and the answer is spiral staircase. So it's all about looking at one word from as many angles as you can,
Napoleon's
just like what you
place for
said.
Napoleon. Yeah.
Yeah, like the Napoleon, which I love. That's a
Yeah.
great one. And I have
And what
definitely
about that? Do you
switched.
do the cryptic ones that supposedly Turing used to test out his, people to work on the Enigma? The kind they're now on the back of the New Yorker, I think. Yeah.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
that's what I was about to say.
Oh, sorry.
Exactly.
Go
I
ahead.
have
Yeah.
moved because cryptics are taking that wordplay there. They started in Great Britain, and they are taking that that wordplay side and just pushing it as far as it'll go. And they're all about crazy homonyms uh, and anagrams and palindromes. And it is a language. You have to, if you look at one without any direction, you'll be baffled. So I had to spend like 3 or 4 hours reading how to play them. But now I do like, I think, I don't say I prefer them, but I like them equally to the crosswords, especially if I prefer them to crosswords that are mostly like, sort of not to sound snobbish, but a little snobbish, the TV Guide crossword, which is not wordplay, which is all about like, one blank
Ed
at a time.
McMahon, right? Yeah, you're right.
Right.
My my son, chip off the old block, the block being my wife, writes crosswords, and he had one a couple weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal. I'm proud to
No
say.
way.
Yeah, it's true. But
That's
he,
fantastic.
but there's a really big difference between ones that have themes and ones that are just a bunch of clever clues. And so I've been living that a little myself. And this is also off the point, but when you talked about being did you read the story in the New York Times? It was several years ago, but there was a couple who had met. They always did the Sunday crossword. And I think Shorts must have okayed it. The guy did a whole crossword that turned out to be an engagement. What AJ and favorite place, and little by little, as they're doing on a Sunday morning, she realizes that through the vehicle of the Sunday New York Times, she's being proposed to, and it's this surreal and peak experience.
Well, it's funny because that was a recurring theme. A lot of I won't say most, but a shocking number of these puzzle obsessives propose or do other life rituals through puzzles. So I know at least a dozen who have proposed either through the crossword or Japanese puzzle boxes, which is a genre I didn't know much about, but they're these gorgeous wooden boxes that take you days to open because you have to twist them and turn them in the right way.
Yeah.
Those are often the most heartbreaking one was I went to this place called Stave, and they make the hardest jigsaw puzzles in the world. And they're beautiful handcrafted puzzles made out of wood and super expensive, like Bill Gates is a fan. But she showed me, the woman at the factory showed me one of a proposal. And I was like, oh, that's great. Can I take a picture and maybe put it in my book? And she said, well, the woman said no, so maybe you shouldn't. And I was like, oh.
Yeah. I like this crossword guy as a guy over here. I just want to read from the table of contents so people get a sense of the range of puzzles and it crosses cultures and different sub worlds within puzzles, but crosswords, the puzzle of puzzles, Rubik's Cube, anagrams, rebuses, jigsaws, mazes, math and logic puzzles, ciphers and secret codes, visual puzzles, Sudoku and Ken-Ken, chess puzzles, riddles, Japanese puzzle boxes, controversial puzzles. I really wondered what that was. Scavenger hunts, puzzle hunts, infinite puzzles, and more. So really, any taste for any kind of puzzle, you'll find it explored to the depths in a really interesting way, both what makes the puzzle interesting, but also great instances. And in fact, we wanted to end, I think maybe famously, people have pointed out that there's a great clue in there. There's a great puzzle within the book, The Puzzler, that is buried in the introduction. And that if you crack that puzzle, the first reader to find and solve not that puzzle, but that gives you entree to a website on which a number of other puzzles, I think 20 some are. The first person to get it will get $10,000. And we wanted to end with our own poor man's version of the same thing. We've asked AJ to give us an example of a puzzle that wound up on the cutting room floor, and the first three to get it will get not just $10,000. Well, not $10,000, but your choice of a free Talking Feds tote or mug, which one day might be of commensurate value. Who knows?
There you go.
So AJ, Can you tell us the puzzle in question? And anyone listening, send your answers into, just email them, questions@talkingfeds.com, same place you would email a Talking 5 proposal or a Patreon proposal. Questions@talkingfeds.com. First 3 to get it right will get their choice of a Talking Feds tote or mug. And you, in fact, have chosen one from your vast cutting room floor
I
degree.
have, and I
Yes?
did not write that, so I don't want to take credit for it, but it's
Yeah.
one that I do love. So here it goes. Are you ready? A businesswoman has 2 regular cubes on her office desk. Each cube has 6 single-digit numbers on it. Every day, she arranges both cubes so that the front faces show the current day of the month. What are the numbers on each face of each cube?
There
That
you
is the
have it,
question.
listeners. And that is a very, very, very small sample of the fun to be had in this volume. The name of the book, The Puzzler, by the multi-talented A.J. Jacobs. Thanks so much for being with us today, A.J. And I look forward to the next world you enter into. But for now, this one's a really great and fun one. So
Well,
thanks for writing.
thank you, Harry. And I just want to thank you for trying to solve the puzzle of how to save our democracy,
Yeah.
which is the biggest,
In-
most important puzzle
in-
right now,
Is it
perhaps of all.
Fermat's last theorem? Maybe. All right. Well,
Hopefully
well,
easier.
well, we're tooling away.